PFC, John Dickinson, United States Marine Corps, World War II, and the Korean War. I interviewed John in Omaha, Nebraska. It was January 15, 2006, almost 20 years ago. Great man, great story. He lived to be 92 years old. He passed away in 2018. He was a young 80 when I interviewed him, but he told me a tremendous story of the Battle of Jima and his experience in Korea. Just two amazing battles he was in. He also fought at Saipan and Tinian in World War II. PFC, Marine, a Marine's Marine in my eyes, just the things that he saw. I've got a photograph at the end of this introduction of him and two of his Marine buddies on Iwo Jima eating lunch, and it's a classic photo, the Marine Corps photo that I obtained, and I think you'll like that. He's on the right in the picture. Just such young man. He was 17 when he joined the Marines. They were in high school when Pearl Harbor was attacked, and his classmates were just chomping at the bits, eager to get out of high school and join the Marine Corps, and John did that. He actually got on the back of a motorcycle with his buddy day after graduation from high school and rode up to Minneapolis where they joined the Marines. So it was a great man after the Marine Corps, just a gentleman and just one of my heroes. And I'm so happy to share his story with you today. I want to thank Glenn Alford for sponsoring and making it possible for you to watch John's story. He picked that story, and I'm so glad he did. Glenn, you've got a great one here. So I want to thank you. Second time working with you. I hope to work with you again. It touches my heart when people step forward and want to help me with my work and really get it. They get what I'm doing, and they want to help support this history, folks. This is history. History is best learned from those who were there. When people are trying to erase our history, I'm their counterpart, and I say no, and I continue to put out these stories. Just an amazing journey I find myself on and continuing on as I interview more veterans this year here at my home in Colorado or elsewhere. So have an opportunity to go to Florida coming up, see if that works out, and then my heart's full, as it always is. So, but I'm grateful for everybody that's supporting my work. And Glenn, I want to salute you, sir. Thank you again for supporting our veterans and just being supportive of this country. You know, America is the greatest country, the America that was founded on, the America that you and I know. Maybe not the America that you see around today, but I'm not going to get political now, and I'm not going to preach at you. And some of you said, amen, okay. All right, that's it for now. I would ask you to share this video with somebody. I've got many, many, many more stories. It's like an airport with planes waiting to take off. They're backed up. I've got so many stories in my archives that I hope to get out this year. And if you'd like to help me, just jump on in, okay? Thank you, God bless you, and I'll see you on my next broadcast. Enjoy John's story. Let's honor this man.
I was with the communication platoon of the 23rd Marines, the 4th Marine Division.
Okay. And your rank at that time of EWO?
I was a PFC.
Okay. And your actual job title is communications?
Yes, I was schooled in telephone lineman.
Okay.
And this involved, especially on an island like Saipan, we were involved in establishing communications by wire and climbing up the poles and wherever we could to string the wires. Okay. Then the unfortunate things would happen is the tanks would come through and tear up our telephone lines once we established communications, and that meant going out at any hour of the day or night and repairing the telephone lines. and sometime you'd take a few riflemen with you to make sure that you were safe and you wasn't getting hit by a sniper.
Let's talk about Iwo Jima now. You're with the 4th Marine Division.
Mm-hmm.
Did you actually go in on February 19th?
Yes, we boarded our landing boats at 5 in the morning after the normal steak and eggs breakfast, which we knew we were going to have when we made the landing. And we were circled around outside, over the turf until we landed at probably about 3:30 in the afternoon. And our objective, the 23rd Marines, was to take the first airstrip. Well, we made it, I think, late that night, but one of the things I always remember of the landing is that the first hole I jumped into, there was a Catholic priest in the same hole, and he was naturally pretty scared and everything, like all of us were, but he said, "This is my first engagement," and he says, "I just came from the Women's Marines in Camp Lejeune," and this was quite a bit different than being with the Women Marines. And he says, I know you've probably been through this a few, so I felt comfortable being with a Catholic priest in case my time was up and I was going to get it, but it worked out all right. And
let's back up just to the night before the landing. What you remember, where you were, and what your thoughts were the night before the landing.
Well, we were, I believe, on the USS Logan, and we were on a ship that had a shakedown crew on there that they happened to run into another ship that night, and the bow of the USS Logan was banged up, and of course it was like I said, I had had previous experience landing on the Saipan operation, so I was real concerned about what was happening. And when we did get ashore, I was so seasick that I didn't care whether I had gotten it or not. I was just so sick. But I had encountered seasickness before, but most of the time I felt good aboard ship except on the landing boats because you're bobbing up and down. And when we were landing there, of course, by that time the Japanese had the gun emplacements pretty well zeroed in on us. A lot of the landing boats got hit before we got unloaded. But I remember one fellow, but I just looked at his picture last night. He got as far as tripping going off the landing boat, and he got back on and went back to the ship and never got to ashore, so he was kind of fortunate that he didn't have to go through the next 27 days or whatever we spent there.
I'm sorry, did you say you were a PFC?
Yes.
Okay. Had you been around combat before then?
Yes,
Okay.
I was in combat when I was 18 years old.
So what's different about what did you know about Iwo Jima?
Well, as soon as we had found out where we were going, we had taken several trips out around the Hawaiian Islands and made landings, and we didn't know where we were going. And then after we were out for 2 or 3 days and didn't have any landings, they broke out the big relief maps and showed us the island and how it looked. And we had different times during the day where we would get together and they would go over the island as much as it was known about it.
So how are you feeling the night before? Were you nervous? What was the mood of the troops?
Well, I tell you, Larry, the biggest thing is you have crowd psychology. You know, you probably think, well, I'm an individual and I'm faced with what could happen and everything, but then you got people all around you that are faced with the same situation that you're involved in. And that's the biggest thing that I found is that, and you're young, you're 18 years old, you don't have a damn worry in the world. At least I didn't. So I always figured if my time was up, I was going to get it. And if not, I was surrounded by well-trained Marines, which later in my career I found it wasn't that nice when we went into Korea and ended up with a bunch of weekend warriors that never had any training except playing the band down in Houston, Texas. And I got in with them, and they didn't know as much about what could happen. So
we'll jump into Korea here in a bit.
okay.
So we're landing on Iwo Jima now. You're tell me about getting into the landing crafts, if they were Higgins boats, and then the trip into shore, what you were seeing and hearing.
If I remember right, we had learned from experience if they got any coral reef. So I believe what we did, we transferred from Higgins boats into Amtraks so that you could go over the coral reef or anything and get up and actually land on the beach. And that's, if I remember right, that's what we were in.
So tell me what you remember, John, about your approach to shore and what was happening in the water and on the beach.
Well, they were shooting from bunkers and enclosed, whatever you call them, that they could, the guns would come out, fire down on us, and then they'd be concealed again. They would pull back and their gun emplacements. And then we also landed under a rolling barrage from the big ships out there, the big cruisers and destroyers. They were firing over us when we went in, but there was so much gunfire that it was just amazing that we could get in under it, but we did. And
so walk me through the landing, what you remember, getting onto the beach, and then what you're seeing and what you're hearing.
Well, the first thing is you got to look for something to get in, some hole in the sand on Iwo Jima, and I even got a little bottle of the sand that shows how you can't really dig into it because it keeps filling up the hole once you dig in, but you just got to find a place and you got to think, is this one incoming or is this outgoing? Because there was firing going on from all directions. And we just slowly made our way up to what we thought was the airstrip. It wasn't much of an airstrip as you would imagine by seeing ones around this country, but it was enough that they could land on it. And it was kind of unique also that the landings we did make, they were always shaped in like a 4. The 4th Marine Division, they were laid out that way, so we thought that was kind of unique that the airstrips were laid out in a numeral 4. But and the first night, it's hard to remember, but I think there was a lot of rain and it was chilly. It was even, well, it was in February 19th.
Do you remember, tell me about the casualties and the Marines, what were we seeing? I mean, they were all over, weren't they?
Yeah, you would hear them yelling, "Corpsman, Corpsman," and the Corpsman did a terrific job. You know, in the Marines, we didn't have our own medical force. It was all Navy. A lot of the sailors thought that then they'd go in and be a hospital corpsman. They end up wearing a Marine uniform all the time. And they were very good. And it was just an experience you don't really want to forget. You know, you think of it every once in a while, but you try to think of something else to forget about it.
Did it bother you when you came back home?
No, I'm getting some compensation from the VA, but it's not for Iwo, it was from Korea.
Yeah. So on Iwo Jima, tell me what the first couple of days, tell me what your job is. You're laying wire?
Laying wire, and I worked quite a bit with the Navajo Indians. I was working in what they call a message center, where you would get the code clerks to, you would get the messages and then give them to the Navajo Indians, and they would go on, "Yatahe, yatahe," and then the Japanese were so confused because they couldn't understand the Navajo language. And the Indians were a very important part of the operation. We have some stories to tell about them, that sometimes they would get a little drunk on us and things like that, but we relied on them to send messages back and forth. But when you're in a regimental communication, your first objective is to establish communication to your battalions, your 1st, 2nd, and 3rd battalions. And that was, you know, it's so much different now with the cell phones and everything, but we had to rely on radio and telephone lines and messengers that would send some messages out over little coded machines that encipher different ones. But
So that all's going on Iwo Jima, the code, the Navajo Indians, everything you just said was happening on Iwo.
yes,
And were you being fired upon during all this? Or?
Well, occasionally, but when you're in regiment, you're not actually as close as the battalion and the line companies, so we did have a little barrier between us and
What do you think's the worst thing you saw on Iwo Jima?
well, just the number of casualties that the ones that were carried back to a hospital unit, and the way the men were so shot up, and the numbers were, it was terrible. The numbers of the ones that were killed and just, you know, laying there with a poncho over them, and you know, you have 2 dog tags, and one of them you shove in the mouth and carry the other one for identification when they get killed. But one thing, if you get with a person that does get killed or shot and needs some medication out of his first aid kit or whatever you have there, you always want to use his. You don't want to use yours, but use the one that got hit. So you want to get that out and do whatever you can before a corpsman arrives and starts
Tell me
working.
about an incident, maybe you helped somebody, or did you?
Well, like I was telling you earlier with George Hoffman, when he got hit, and he ran the right way, and he ran the wrong way, and I ran the right way, and until we could get a corpsman in, he was laying there, and you know, he made a few remarks about his sex life if he did lose him and things like that. But he was rather a colorful character anyway, that he was kind of amusing all the time, so we had joked about it until he got hauled away.
Were you on the island the whole 36 days?
I thought it was 27.
Okay.
I know we went over on, our outfit went over on 3 ships, and our regiment came back on the 1.
Did you see the flag raising?
Yes.
Okay, describe what you saw and what you felt. When you
I was down on the airstrip and looking over to the left when they raised the flag, and of course it was a great inspiration to all of us when that flag was flying up there. So it was quite emotional to see that flag flying up there. And like I say, I was down and could see it from looking off, because you know the island wasn't very big, so you could see quite a bit around there.
Did you get in any skirmishes with the weapon with the Japanese yourself?
No, I was shot at a lot, but I didn't actually get in a skirmish with them.
What does that feel like to be shot at?
Well, you just try to find a way to get away from the line of fire is all you do. You just jump into a hole and until someone goes out and gets the sniper or whoever's firing at you. And of course you can't control much when they start dropping mortar shells around you. You just have to hope that one doesn't come where you are.
John, how would you describe the sound of battle? What does it sound like?
Well, it sounds like the 4th of July. I was never too excited about going to these fireworks. I had seen enough fireworks when they were the real thing, but it's similar to it. You hear a lot of the firing all night long.
Tell me about when you left the island. What do you remember about maybe the day you left, what your thoughts were? Did you go through the cemetery at all while you were there?
No, I didn't. Actually, I saw where they were burying them all, but I didn't go up to view any of them.
What do you remember about leaving, and did you get onto a ship and get a shower and a hot meal? Describe that.
Well, of course, the big thing was getting some good hot food. And if I remember right, I think it took us about 12 days to get back. And I believe we were on a merchant marine ship. And we had a choice of corned beef hash about every day. And what was so demoralizing was you could look in and see the ship's crew eating good food, and we were eating, I think, corned beef hash every other day. And we had been eating sea rations for over a month, or around a month on the island, but we did look forward to at least a clean place to sleep on a bunk bed or in the...
Did you have a bath? I mean, what do you remember about it? Or on the island, or before you left, or how'd that work?
Well, like I say, Larry, it's hard to recollect some of these things because I have a problem of the ones that I was in with during the Korean War and some of the experiences there.
Okay.
So it's hard to concentrate on one of them, and but we all appreciated getting aboard a clean ship, and we always kidded the sailors about how they can get a combat star for a battle when they're within 100 miles of the island and always have a nice clean place to sleep every night. So,
well, let's go into Korea a little bit. I mean, you said you were a replacement for the ones at the Chosin Reservoir, but were you involved in the Chosin Reservoir battle at all? Or?
No, when I got over there in the first part of February of '51, that the Chosin Reservoir was over around Christmas time. And when I got over there, like I say, I was a replacement with a bunch of band members from Houston, Texas, and when we got on an old broken down train to go up towards the front lines, it was cold, and we would take part of the benches out of in the train cars and start a fire right while we were going up there to keep warm. And then when we got up and got issued ammunition, one of the things I remember is they give out bandoliers of ammunition, and these so-called weekend warriors, they put bandoliers of cartridges all over themselves, and I took one clip. They said, where's your ammunition? I said, I don't need any ammunition. I got one clip, and if we get in a firefight, I'll be using all this ammunition that you'll be loaded down with, trying to move up and down the hills. And if you get hit, I'll just use yours. And oh, they were wide-eyed about that, because you don't want to get loaded down with a bunch of ammunition when you can just get by with what the other guy gets when he gets hit.
Well, tell me what you had heard about the Chosin Reservoir before you got there, and what did you hear about that?
Well, I really didn't hear too much because we were out at sea quite a bit of the January when they were getting out of there. So I really didn't know it. I got put into a 60 mortar platoon, and or a squad or something. It wasn't a full platoon, and I didn't know anything about 60 millimeter mortars and carrying ammunition on that. So I had been trained in communications and experienced that. So I spent about 5 or 6 weeks with 60 millimeter mortars, and finally I convinced them that I had experience in communications, and so I got transferred on Easter Sunday out of a 60 millimeter mortar platoon into communications, and that was a relief because those guys were up and down those damn hills loading with ammunition. And I had just gotten out of college and had a degree, and here I was walking up and down the hills in Korea lugging ammunition. And I had gone through a test in Pendleton for a commission, and they said, well, we'll call you later on. Yeah, and they let me know about the time over in Korea, whether I wanted to come back to go to officer candidate school instead of getting discharged. So.
Can you just tell me, John, a little bit about Korea? Tell me why we were there and what was the purpose of our presence over there and who we were fighting.
Well, we were over there to control the spread of communism, and it was as far as the terrain over there, it was so much different than the island fighting in the Pacific, because you were either going up a hill or down a hill, and it was very hard on you physically because of the all day long you would be in the going on different, advancing up into in the middle of Korea, and it was so cold that I can remember my canteen of water was frozen solid, and the only moisture you could get was grab a snowbank and grab some snow to put in your mouth. And then at night, your salvation was your sleeping bag. If you didn't have a sleeping bag, there just wasn't any place to go at night. So what you had to do is you had 2 pair of socks, and you would the ones you were wearing all day would be all moist and everything. You'd have to put them under your arms to dry out at night, so you'd have some fresh ones to wear. And that, for about 30 days of using snow, you were in these snow packs, and the socks, it would get all wet, and so you didn't get a bath for about whole 30 days over there.
Did you eat? What did you eat?
Well, we had cans of sea ration, and then whatever we could salvage over there from any of the old houses we went through and could pick up.
Did you eat any of the Tootsie Rolls that the guys said they ate?
Well, I didn't ever see any Tootsie Rolls over there, but one day we would be set to have lima beans and ham, and we'd trade for everyone to eat lima beans and ham, and the next time we'd trade around and you'd eat spaghetti all day, but you'd cook it over a little hot plate or those hot fuel things.
Tell me about, you told me about Korea, spread of communism, we're over there, and then tell me about the fighting, who were fighting?
Well, I don't know whether I told you or someone, but on May 1st of 51, we went up on Hill 902, and the Chinese come after us. And all night long they were blowing their bugles and the horses and coming after us. And that night we survived, and everyone that left that hill was either on a stretcher or carrying a stretcher. And our gunnery sergeant Wilson, which I bought a clipping on him, got the Congressional Medal of Honor. But one of the demoralizing things was that we were up on there, and the Navy fighter planes came over us and start firing 50 caliber guns at us, not knowing that we were the Marines and not the Koreans. And we got that and waved them off after some signals. But it was, when you're getting friendly fire on you, plus putting up with the Chinese coming at you. But that was probably one of my worst experiences in Korea, was up on that hill.
Did you see any of your friends get killed in Korea?
Yes. This one friend of mine from New York, he was a Jewish fella, and he went to pick up a souvenir, and instead of picking it up, the Korean was still alive, so he shot him right in the stomach and blew a hole right through him. But that cured a lot of going out souvenir hunting after you have a firefight, is when you don't know whether they're still half alive or not.
So we're fighting the Chinese, not the North Koreans.
Well, we drove them back. We went over the 38th parallel more than once, but we didn't retreat. We made a strategic withdrawal. You know, Marines don't retreat. They reorganize. And so,
Tell me a little bit about the Marines, the camaraderie of the Marines, the pride of the Marines in battle.
yeah, you have a lot of self-assurance that you know that the Marines that you're with will usually, in most cases, stay with you. They, you know, of course, we were always criticizing the Army the U.S. Army and how some of their actions, but the Marines were trained enough that they will look out for each other. And like going back to another instance on Saipan where the Marine General Howland Mad Smith relieved General Smith from the Army because he wouldn't move his troops. Because the Marines' whole philosophy is that you move fast and try to overcome the enemy, where the Army uses a different approach to it.
All right. How old are you now again?
I was 80 in July.
Okay. Looking back on your life with the Marines and the Korean Iwo Jima, does any of that have any significance in your life anymore, or is it just something that happened along?
Well, I tell you, it's more so now than when I was growing up after coming back, because you know, you run into a lot of old veterans and you start talking about experiences then, but it seems like that during a period of your life from when you first entered into the business world and were working, you don't think of that much, but then I spend a lot of time at the Veterans Hospital and the Veterans Home here, and so I visit with a lot of veterans, and I was, you know, concerned too about this late in life of how many problems that you are having from your time in the service. Like the VA has given me compensation now for what happened to my feet over in Korea, frostbitten feet. And they also take care of all my teeth because of the time that I couldn't have any dental work done. And then I didn't want to stay in the service long enough to have it all done, so they considered them all service connected. So the dental, all my dental work is considered service connected.
Tell me about your feet. What happened and why it happened and what was going on?
Well, because like I was telling you, when your feet are all damp from walking all day long, and then it gets so cold at night that I still have to sleep every night with socks on it because of my feet were frostbitten in Korea. And well, the living conditions in Korea were not very good because of where I was. We never had any place to stay except a damn foxhole at night. And not to say too much about the blacks, but there were some coming into the Marines at that time, and I can remember one black fellow that he thought what he was carrying was too heavy for him, so he tossed his sleeping bag away. And then when night come around, he didn't have any place to go. He was jumping around there trying to get warm, and no one was going to let him in his foxhole because he was too lazy about carrying his sleeping bag and all of his gear, so he just tossed him down a hill. So that's not very good thinking about what's going to happen at night when the only place to go is crawl in a damn sleeping bag to be warm all night.
So at what point in Korea did you have to leave because of the feet? I mean, how do you function with frostbitten feet?
Well, they were just taken care of, and then I just survived with them after that until I spent several weeks in the hospital over the winter where I had surgery on my colon where they went in and took a big polyp out. And I was in intensive care for 10 days, and then I was pretty well examined by all the doctors in there.
This was back there in Korea?
No, the only hospital I had was prior to going to Iwo Jima. I was in the hospital over in Hawaii on Maui where I had an appendectomy, and then they let me out on New Year's Day to go aboard ship to go to Iwo, and I was on light duty, and so I had a friend of mine. In fact, one of the pictures, one of them in that picture was the one that carried my sea bag aboard ship so I could go to Iwo. Of course, we didn't know where we were going, but...
Yeah. John, looking back on your career and being an American citizen and having fought for our country, what does freedom mean to you?
Well, very much so. I am constantly reminded of patriotism and the freedom we do have because I'm involved in the American Legion and the VFW and the Disabled Veterans Organization and the 40 and 8, so I'm constantly going to different meetings, and there's always talk about burning of the flag and things like that, so patriotism is very important in my life.
What would you tell a young person today that knows nothing about war, that lives in this country, and yet they take their freedoms for granted? What would you tell a young person about the price for freedom?
Well, I'd tell them what these veterans had to go through in World War II, that they can enjoy the life they're having right now. But I believe that they ought to have a 2-year enlistment for all of the young men to go in and go through the experience and learn discipline. I think it would do them all good.
I mean, you've worked around disabled veterans, and to me that's a reminder that there's a price for freedom.
There is, definitely.
Should our young people know these things?
Well, I don't know. There is some in the newspapers and the media about it, but I don't think they have enough of it to instill it in their minds, the importance of having a country like this and the freedom that we do have. If they had to go over in some of those countries and see how they live, I think they would change their mind real fast.
Do you think it's important that we capture stories like this and preserve this? Tell me about that.
Yeah, I think it's very important. One of my grandson is doing a project for his 8th grade graduation, and he's compiling all the information that I can feed him on this. And I was just told yesterday that my daughter, she says, can he borrow the Japanese bayonet that you got at home for a hands-on demonstration? And she says, can you get me pictures and stuff so he can use that in his speech? And luckily I do have a couple grandsons that are, ask me a lot of questions, and when they come over to the house, they love to go in my computer room and look at the different pictures and stuff that I have.
Tell me why it's important that we remember, document, and record this.
Well, I think it's very important because I think you got something that is going to be a reference for students to go back and look and see what happened during World War II, because like you mentioned, I'm sure, and other ones, that there's 1,500 of us dying every day, and someone's got to record this, and so that it'll be available for the future. Of course, Tom Brokaw, I think he did a great job on the greatest generation. And he's he done a real great job on putting out his books on that.
What does the American flag mean to you?
Well, very much, because it always reminds me of when that flag was raised on Iwo Jima. I don't think it ever loses my mind whenever I see the American flag displayed in any way that it doesn't take a few moments of my mind to think about seeing what the Marines went through on Iwo to raise that flag and go into that godforsaken little 4x7 island and take that, and so that we would have a landing strip to help the bombers come back from Japan. And so it does remind me of Iwo an awful lot whenever I see anything about the American flag.
Are you proud that you've served our country?
Very much so. It was an experience that, of course, my life isn't much left of it, but it always has been a reminder of what I have gone through. And yet I don't feel that I'm any kind of a hero. I just happen to be in that place at the times that it happened. And of course the dead ones are still over there, buried over.
Sir, into the camera.
Stand up?
No, if you can do it from there, I
okay.
understand.
Okay.
Great. Okay. Now stay there. I'm going to take a picture.